Hello there, guys, and welcome to another Cat Stream. Tonight, we're actually going to be having just a little bit of a discussion. It's just something that I actually kind of thought up about. It's just a case of I was wondering if it was a case of people that say that you can't discipline your children in a way of, tanning their back legs if they've done something very naughty, and it's a last resort type thing. I'm wondering if that leads on to other processes. So, first of all, though, we need to find out if people actually not necessarily like the idea of smacking, because I don't think anybody likes the idea of it, but is it a necessity and is there circumstances in which you can use it? But first of all, I'm Common Sense Guy. I'm Jason. But I'm also here with the Laughing Ogre. How are you doing today, sir? It's been a while.
Doing pretty good. Ready to talk about whooping on kids, whooping ass.
God damn it.
I think every time this topic comes up, I think of one specific person, and that's Stefan Molyneux. Because he's like a big no spanker. Dude, don't spank. But I have a little expertise on this positive and negative punishment. Maybe we'll talk about it as we progress.
Yeah, no, this sounds quite interesting. I would be quite interested in knowing the psychology behind it. I mean, me personally, I would say that the psychology behind parents actually punishing their children in the right way at the right time. Make sure that people are not assholes to other people. Because if your parents are not going to be the arbiters of punishment, then what the fuck's a teacher going to do when a teacher can't do anything either?
Listen, and I wanted to start this way because this is where I'm going to come from all night. So everyone, including yourself, needs to know this. Some people are Oliver Twist. Some people are born Fagin and grow up to turn people out, kids out, and teach them how to be pickpockets. Some are pickpockets and scallions. Some are born princes. Apparently. Now, don't get me wrong. I could be wrong because this sounds so fucking crazy, common sense. You may not believe this, and you live over there. So if it's just tabloid nonsense, you tell me. But I think the Queen let one of her grandchildren marry a Yank just recently.
Okay.
I think that happened. That there's a half black American woman that now lives somewhere at Buckingham Palace or close to the vicinity.
Somewhere. Yeah.
It's in line. It's in the royal peerage. But anyway, to make a small point, she apparently has a bump in her belly, what they call a baby bump nowadays. she's pregnant.
Oh dear.
That kid is going to be born to prince. It's the way it is, and we, as a society, right now, your average child will have an easier life than that baby that's inside of this royal. It's for most if it's going to be any kind of good, because they have more rules than normal people. It's not easy to be a prince if you're going to be a good one at all. It's not easy at all to be a royal. It would fucking suck. Anyway, so that's where I'm coming from without going on like a 20-minute long. Where my standpoint is people can be, they might be a Fagin, they might be an Oliver Twist, they may be the baby of an American-born woman that's now apparently a princess in England, and all of these things can happen, or they could be the son or daughter of a pauper.
Exactly.
And so they may have a parent that molests them, that beats them, that puts cigarettes out in their armpits, that does horrible things to them, or they may be the parent that uses corporal punishment or not. I want to start out just by saying that corporal punishment in and of itself, in my opinion, is not evil. If corporal punishment, it can be used in evil ways, but corporal punishment, the positive punishment, adding on a spanking to a child is not evil in and of itself.
No, I completely and utterly agree with you. To give my quick little premise of the way that I think and the way that I feel, I would actually have to say I have to agree with the idea of spanking. I do think that there has to be steps that would warrant a spanking, so to speak, as in a case of you shouted to the kid, you've asked the kid to go on a timeout, blah, 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 blah. Like, you've already had precursors to get to that point. I'm not just saying that, you've dropped a bit of cereal on the floor and whack, you get hit around the head. I'm not suggesting that, and I don't think anybody else here is either. But if it comes to a point where the child is acting up so much that the only way that you're going to be able to discipline that child is by slapping the back of their legs or by, I don't know, spanking their ass as they would do in the cartoons and whatnot, then I don't have a problem with that. As long as it's not to the point of completely and utterly hurting the child and it's done as a continuation thing, I don't have a problem with that.
There's a one real big reason why corporal punishment in that way is going by the wayside. Let me also say that it's none of your business. If someone's not killing their child, if the child's not coming in broken bones, black eyes, standing up welts after a day, things like that, it's none of your business. The only reason it's anybody's business at that point is because it's a human being inflicting injury on another human being. That's part of the just basic law. It's part of the law of nature. But let's remember, right now, people don't have 150 years ago in this country, people would have 7 children would be a mediocre sized family. To have 12, 15 children was nothing. It was not out of the ordinary. It was everywhere.
Yeah.
What are you going to do if you have 13 children living in the house, ranging in age from 2 years old on all the way up to 17?
Sure.
I mean, if you don't, there's a
I'm with you.
From one of these religious books, and it says about if you spare the rod, you spoil the child. I agree with that.
In some circumstances, no, I definitely agree. I think something's gone wrong with my Twitter. I wonder if I've been banned. No, I'm fine.
Hey, don't use the NPC, man. You'd be fucked. You're done.
I've noticed that, yeah. No, but I have to actually say that there are certain things that I definitely disagree with. I think that going out and making your own switch for people that would use that terminology and things like that, and then the father or the mother using it, I don't know. There's certain aspects where I don't know. But the idea in itself and the level of what you can and cannot do, I'm not too sure on that. But the actual principle of it, as in the idea of being able to spank your child if the child has been playing up, I think that everybody has a right to do that. The reason why is because if a child learns that it can get away with almost literally murder without having any, and sometimes necessarily having a physical interaction where they're physically going to feel some pain because of their own actions, then how the hell are they going to learn and socially interact with other people? And when it does come to that point of a physical attack that's happened to them, how are they going to be able to deal with that if they've never had that inflicted upon them before? And I'm not trying to say that parents are going to physically attack their children. I'm not saying that. I'm merely suggesting that if you've got hit on the back of the legs or whatever, then you're knowing that you've done something fucking wrong at that point in time. You can use some logic and work out where you've gone wrong and what's happened. What did you do to piss this person off? And you can logically learn from it. Where if nothing like that's ever happened to you, you're not going to actually really know the reasons why. And then guess what happens? You become a victim. And then you start blaming yourself because you think that you're a victim of everything. And that's where this whole I'm a victim comes from. And I'm pretty sure of that. I don't have any evidence to back it up, obviously. It's all conjecture. But I honestly do think that because we don't spank children anymore, that children know that they can get away with literally fucking murder. I'm pretty sure of that.
It causes more criminals. Look at our society. I come from the corporal era, and I come from a family where the corporal system was applied, I would say, in a responsible way. In other words, my old man, I don't think he ever hit me to make himself feel better. And to me, that's a personal thing. You never know. You don't know what this kid has done up to the point. I just want to say, remember this. Mind, I can't say enough. Mind, in the case of children, mind your own business. The strange thing to me is nowadays a parent snatches one of their children by the hair of the head and whoops its ass. No visible marks, but somebody sees a child possibly wearing a diaper, so it's just noise to the child and scary. Parents mad. Next thing you know, there's some investigation, and they want to take the kid away, and maybe even do. But then I've called because I've had people contact me in one situation that I know of. It's ongoing.
Sure.
I was contacting them, was like, look, we've tried everything. Would you mind, because you have intimate knowledge of this situation, Yes, and I'm talking about a filth hole that I can't even get into. It's one of those people that hoarder isn't the word. They're just filthy people and let animals in the house, and they're
Yeah.
just disgusting people, and they don't do nothing about it. So it's the big thing too, man. I'll be echoing this all night. Mind your own business. What that we're talking about at Common Sense kind of bums me out. I always stay on my base, which is look, some young boys. My parents had enough. What time was me? I was the youngest of 8. I have 7 brothers and sisters. By the time I was 11, I got to go to a really nice, probably something like where poor Kavanaugh had to go, where they make you act so right during the school week that you just got to drink Budweiser on the weekend or you're fucking go nuts. And I'm talking about in daggone 10th grade, 11th grade.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I'm not going to get bent out of shape. But coming from that era, I'll always believe that juxtaposed to this generation, corporal punishment, it works out better. You create people that end up believing they can do it. I've seen so many videos of kids screaming listen, when I was young, Common Sense, were teachers ever able to paddle you or whip you when you were in school?
No.
See, when I was in school, if the teacher didn't want to do it themselves, there was always a designated teacher. Man, whenever I was at the place I just was talking about, at boarding school, this headmaster would beat you, give you 5 of the best.
Sure.
Anyway, I never saw a child in any school just go ape shit and start telling teacher, fuck you. Now look online. Look, put in child goes nuts on teacher.
Yeah, there's fucking tons of them.
Oh yeah. In the old days, Mr. Bruiser would come down there, drag you down to the bathroom by the ear, paddle the shit out of you with the Board of Education, and take you squealing back to class where you would sit on that paddled ass and it would hurt.
Yeah, and you'd be able to feel it all day.
Oh yeah.
For me, I wasn't in that. For me, I wasn't in that generation. I played out quite a lot when I was a lot younger, but I always had that threat from the teachers. We're going to tell your parents. Now that threat was worth more than any other thing that it was even going to the police or anything. If they said, "Oh, we're going to call your parents and we're going to call your dad," that was it. I was quiet. I knew what was going to happen if they called my dad. They called my dad. I was going to get a fucking tanning. My ass was going to fucking turn red and I would not be able to sit down for a fucking good day. But that's the point. Just because that they themselves can't do the act, as in my generation, doesn't mean that they can't use that fear of that act to keep you back in line again. Now, everybody's going to rebel, especially when they're teenagers. Everybody rebels at some description and some aspect, but everybody rebels. If you don't have that fear of a form of punishment that is going to physically harm you, and I don't mean, oh, you're going to get beaten to a pulp by your mum and dad or whatever. I mean something that actually fucking just hurts, as in being slapped on the ass. And you're not going to be worried about a detention. It's just wasting time. You're not going to be worried about being expelled because you get to stay at home. You get to do other things. It doesn't affect you personally. And that's where we're going wrong now. We're putting so much pressure on the parents to do everything, but then taking away all the tools that the parents need to be able to discipline their children at the same time. And then we blame the parents for everything.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong, some parents are wankers and some parents are cunts, but in the general scheme of things and generalizing, it's a point of if you take away their tools to discipline, how can they discipline?
Sometimes you just got to grab them little rug monkeys right by the hair of the head and snatch them.
See, I thought you were going to do a Donald Trump then. I thought you were going to do a Donald Trump.
Snatch them up right off their feet, man. About an inch, 2 off the ground, have them dangling right by the hair of the head and looking them right in the face and say, "You listen here, you little son of a bitch. I'll end your fucking life."
I wouldn't go that far, but you don't. Well, actually, no.
Man, I had some rough teachers, man. We had a teacher when I was in 11th grade when he came in halfway through the season. So he came in after Christmas break. I ain't even gonna say his name because I hate him, but he was so mean. He was so mean. And for the littlest thing, wearing, like, there was what they call the ad building, and you weren't allowed to wear blue jeans or anything but dress pants through there.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be in uniform, but if
Yeah.
you know, were like rushing through there. So anyway, if he caught you there, he would grab you by the ear and
Yep,
take
I've
you
been
out
done
of
that.
there. Yeah, anyway. But these things, and I'm saying that, see, look, I obviously I rue it, but in the whole time that I was in school, I was only paddled 3, maybe 4 times.
Hmm.
And I was a pretty rambunctious child, and there was no Ritalin in my life. You know, nowadays, if you get
Yeah.
because I want to say that a couple things, like, as you were mentioning, detention, but 2 things. Let's look at these 3 things together. 2 things against the one.
Mm.
Drugging someone or adding something like detention or something to that effect, or in my case, if for anybody that's listening that's been parochial school, they have a lot of times will have free labor where you're working at some kind of strange factory that they have on the campus
Yeah.
grounds or something like that.
I've never done that, but I did do like fence building and things like that, and helping the janitor move the chairs around for assembly and whatnot.
All have their place.
Mm.
And I think that a good educator should know when to apply, because some kids would never be appropriate to use corporal
Mm.
punishment on them. Some kids,
Mm.
it would never be appropriate to give them some kind of sit in a room, because that's their problem to begin with. You know,
Mm.
I learned some of the greatest things I know about human psychology from a man that works a one-room school, and that's what he does from K through 8. And I mean, there were so many times I just volunteered for a year to get a a golden star on my record. But
Yeah.
you know, there were so many times where I figured common sense that the proper punishment would be, you know, a stern talking to
Yeah.
and missed recess, sit in the corner. A lot of times the answer is almost, for children, almost seems like you're rewarding them.
In
It
some
really does.
aspects, yeah. In some
It
aspects,
does.
especially for ones that didn't want to go outside and play in the first place, they would act
Well,
up on purpose just to stay in.
Well, no, I think the ones that want to go out are the most important. Because let me give you an example.
Mm.
My dog, she's been going a little bit, doing some shit and I'm not trying to compare dogs with children, but I am. So just bear with me. It's the way it is. Psychology. So she's been doing some little things here and there that she doesn't usually do, like get in the trash, do some little
Mm.
dumb shit. It's getting to be winter. We don't go out and throw the ball as much. We assume that the reason she's doing what she's doing is not necessarily her fault. It may be because we haven't been taking her out and throwing the ball and exercising this out of her. So when
Exactly.
children are doing wrong, yeah, sometimes they need a wallop. Very few.
Mm.
For me, I'm saying I was hyperactive. I believe I was raised right. And my whole schooling by teachers, maybe 3 paddlings. And my whole life with my parents, I may have been whipped maybe another 3 times my entire life. But
Mm.
those things, you remember them. They're
Yeah, you
quicker, more
do.
efficient than you know, any kind of punishment like sit in the corner or any kind of detention. And when you add detention, I mean, these kids need more recess. These are the kids that it's 15 minutes before recess, and you look at them and say, "Listen, little Billy, we really need this kind of leaf from the far side of the school grounds. Will you go get that for us? And by the time he gets back, it's time for recess again." Just to let him get out. And that, so anyway, I mean, I hope you understand what I mean. Sometimes the punishment doesn't seem to fit. So sometimes that thing that doesn't seem to fit is an ass whipping. Sometimes that thing that doesn't seem to fit is going out to more recess, is getting more time, more freedom, because restrictions on intelligent and inquisitive children can lead to a lot more problems than giving them more freedom. And that's a fact.
No, I have to agree with that. Um, I think with the idea with schooling or with parents, I think that's not necessarily a different process, but I do think that it does warrant quite a lot. There is definitely a correlation between the two. The reason why I say that is because, as I said before, I was scared of when my teachers would tell me that my dad was going to whip me, so to speak. So if it was a case that the teacher could do it, then it bypasses them calling my parents. And it made it slightly like the old Bobby, when the old Bobby wouldn't necessarily arrest you, but take you back to your mum and dad. That was more worrying than when you were being arrested.
Mm.
Because you knew that your mum and dad at that point, whoever did the disciplining, was going to fucking discipline you. And that was the embarrassment. It was the embarrassment as well as the punishment that you knew was coming.
See, there's where my parents were lacking. I wish that my dad would have been more along the lines of, if you get an ass whooping at school, you're going to get one at home. Because my dad was straight and to the point. The leather belt come off, your pants stayed up, you stayed standing up. He snatched you by the hair of the head, walloped you twice, and you're gone. It's the end of it. It was more of a I can bust your ass kind of a thing. But that's not what happened. If I got paddled at school, which, as I mentioned, happened a couple times. I mean, I had a motorcycle when I was very young. My dad got me a mini bike when I was just, I mean, as soon as the training wheels came on my bicycle, he's like, well, you can ride. Let's get some with an engine on it. And we got me like a 5 horsepower. So if I came home, got ass whipping, dad would know. The teacher would call, or there's a note usually that had to come home and get signed or something. And I would have my motorcycle taken away for a week, or my comic books put up, my Atari taken away.
Exactly.
And that's, I mean, yeah, exactly. But here's the thing. I worked a lot. I don't know how, I can't speak for every kid. And so when I was sitting there, and I would have either been riding my bike for an hour, my motorcycle for an hour, or maybe reading a comic book or playing the Atari for an hour. Now I'm sitting staring at the wall thinking of evil shit. It wasn't good for me. It really wasn't. It's not good for a lot of kids, especially if they're hyperactive. Make them, I mean, if anything, if you do take something like that away from a child, give them something else to do. It can even be something they don't like. I mean, make them do the wash and clean up after.
That's exactly what I was just about to suggest. See, that's the levels of punishment that we get to. You don't just start off with the smacking. You don't just start off with the beating or whatever. You have to level it up, so to speak, and using memes as meme as in playing a game. You go from one level to another level. So first of all, you tell the kid off. If that doesn't work, you then sit them in a corner or something. You then ground them. If they're still carrying on, you then take away their stuff, as in like a phone or whatever it is nowadays. When you do that, you force them to do like taking the trash out or doing the bins, or which is the same thing, or doing the washing up or something, some sort of cleaning or some sort of role that's around the house or whatever. And if that doesn't work, then you have to resort to the last bit. But those are the levels. And those are the ways that the discipline is supposed to be done. But we've lost that last bit. And that last bit, even though feminists and people themselves don't really like the idea of it, it fucking works. It really does work. Because I'm actually I was a cunt at school, I'll be honest. I really was a cunt at school. To the point where when I was in my Spanish class one time, I was bored. I didn't like the teacher. We argued all the time. I set my desk alight with an aerosol can and a lighter just because I wanted to get out of the fucking class. And when he told me to leave, I smiled at him and I said, yep, you're a cunt. And as I went out the door, I slammed the door. I slammed the door so hard that the door fell off. Do you think the school billed me? Do you think the school billed my family? Do you think that they did anything? All they did was give me a detention. Do you know what my dad did? Do you know what my dad did when he found out and got a letter saying what I did? He threw a salt pot at me. No, he threw a salt pot at me, glass salt pot about that big, solid glass as a salt pot. He threw that at me because that was the closest thing at him when I was coming up the stairs. And I'll tell you what. Yeah, but I tell you what though, I fucking stood still. And as he come up to me and started talking to me and everything else of that, because he see that I was already scared, because I think he missed me on purpose anyway. But because he did that, I was already had the fear of God in me because I knew I did something fucking wrong. So when, instead of him hitting me or doing like something like that, he went, go do the washing up. I'm taking away your phone. You're not playing on your computer anymore. Go into your bedroom and stay there for the rest of the night. I knew I did something fucking wrong. Where when I was at school, it didn't really matter to me. Not at all. I think you have to have those levels that are in place.
Yeah, and see, I'm not saying like a salt pot, but with my old man now, when I say I might have gotten like three whippings in my life from my old man, I'm not counting love taps. And what I mean by that is once in a while when he was telling me something and I'm like slack-jawed gazing off into the stars because I don't really give a fuck.
On the back of their head.
Yeah, you know. I mean, you might get a little pop here and there. I don't count that. I don't. Yeah. I mean, that's because when I seen the title, I know it's. I mean, it's probably. I know you're trying to be intriguing, trying to be, titillating, But smacking, yeah, I mean, come on, man. Smacking is underrated.
Yep.
Again, if you're not doing it to make yourself feel better, if you're doing it to get this freaking brat's attention, I would also say that most of these things apply to boys. If you're if you got some if you got some 17-year-old girl over your knee and you're spanking her, you got a problem, man.
Yeah, that's definitely not a form of discipline anymore, is it? But no,
No,
I
unless
actually
you're a
completely agree with
17-year-old
you.
boy.
Exactly. But I have to say that I do actually agree with you that it is more of a, myself personally, and I think you would agree with me, but I'm not going to put words in your mouth. But I do think that it's more of a genderized issue because I think that us as boys, we need to know our physical limitations because as us as boys or men or whatever, we generally try and push the boundaries because we generally trying to rebel because we're trying to find where we are in the pack. We're trying to
Yes.
find out where we sit socially. And that's just the point of evolution. Now, if we get a slap every now and again telling us not to challenge the teacher or telling us not to challenge the copper or telling us not to challenge our mum and dad, then that's our point. That's nature telling us that we're not ready to leave. We're not ready to be on our own yet. I think that's what we really have to look at.
Well, where do we draw these lines, though? Because eventually, you guys say, well, parents. If a parent's not supposed to slap or hit or spank or anything like that, well, what about the military? What about the? I could go before I go that far. What about the police? What about the cops in the neighborhood? I mean, if you don't listen to them, they beat you up. I mean,
Yeah.
just don't pay your taxes long enough. They come and drag
Yep.
you away.
Yep.
In fact, if you borrow some money, the bailiffs will come to your house and take your freaking stuff to pay for what you borrow.
Exactly.
Uh,
Exactly.
so
I
anyway,
just I was going to say I just quickly wanted to point out something that Tank said or the T34 Tank.
oh yeah,
He
he's always got
says
something good to say. Yes,
I quite like him. He's a decent lad.
yes.
Um, He put out the common sense guy. Do you have siblings? Yes, I do. I have two siblings. I have an older brother, much older brother, and I have a younger sister. Do you think you would have been better behaved if you had any? Obviously, in the first is false. Um, I tell you one thing. I knew not to take my brother's stuff. I knew that, and I'm sure my sister knew not to take my stuff. I'll just leave that as that.
Yeah.
But yeah, me and my brother used to scrap all the time. But that's the point. That's as I was trying to suggest before with the genderized issues on this occasion. It is the case of my brother was the one that I was trying to rebel against and trying to find if I was socially in a better position than what he was to find out where my strengths were. And every time he would slap me down like what an older brother is supposed to do to give me grounding, to realize that I'm not ready to do this stuff yet, to make me realize I'm still a child and to stop acting like a twat.
Mm-hmm.
Because it wasn't always a case of people beating you up because of you've done something wrong. It was sometimes a case of them giving you a slap around the back of the head, as we said, to go, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you doing this? And it's just that initial shock of realizing that you've actually done something wrong. I think we miss that a lot. I think a lot of people when they go, oh well, fighting's bad. Yeah, fighting is bad, but sometimes it happens in families because that's what we're supposed to do. Not trying to say that people need to knock each other out. That's not a sign of a functioning family. But the arguments that happen in family, that's supposed to happen. Because if you love somebody, you're willing to defend your point and defend their point. That's the
Man,
reason why you argue with people.
my brother used to lord it over me. Not what it was. He's my oldest brother, the oldest male in our family. He would lord it over me for a long time. And by the time I was about 15, um, I didn't. I think he knew too, because when I was 15, let's see, he was 23 ish.
Mm.
But I think he did know even then. Man, I could crush him. He's 5'8". He's toughish little guy, but he's a little dude.
Yeah.
At that time, I was 15. I was 5'11" and weighed 195 pounds. I wasn't fat. I was a football player. Anyway, and it went for a long time. Common sense that I pretended that this was still the way it was. You know, he was my big bad older brother.
Yeah.
And by the time I was 19, man, getting ready to leave Orlando for a while, and we both knew it, and was going to go to North Carolina actually with Mrs. Ogre. Hell, this was right when this was 25 years ago. That's right when we got together.
Yeah.
Make a long story short, we drank some Goldschlager, and one thing led to another. He started all this shit, dude. I whipped his ass. I beat his ass, and it's not really been the same ever since. I would suggest to younger people, if that happens, if you can get out of it at all. And I tried that night. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I just jumped on, beat his ass. I went to the whole rigmarole. I ran all around the place we were at with him chasing me, the whole 9 yards. But I should have went another step further and just keep going or something, and just got the hell out of there before it came to that.
Hindsight's 2020, though, isn't it, mate? Unfortunately.
Yep. But when someone has that power, it goes for your father, your brother, your older sister, whatever. When someone has had that power over you, to take it away from them that way, it's not going to end good, and you'll regret it, because that person will never forgive you for it. You gotta just pretend it's always the same.
Absolutely true. Completely, absolutely true. Me and my older brother, we used to work together. We used to do a market stall, and we were arguing all the way home. We were almost coming to blows, so to speak, when we were actually driving. And we got out, and he started throwing fists at us. This is when I was a lot skinnier, when I was a lot better. I used to do karate 4 times a week. I used to play football every day of the week. So I used to be quite agile on my feet. I never did anything back to him. I just moved out of the way of his punches. He ended up steamrolling himself out. He steamed himself out. And I just laughed at him. And I really wish that I didn't laugh at him, because at that point, he knew the dynamic in the relationship changed. And I really wish that I never did that, because
it can be that much too.
Yeah.
I mean, excuse me, it can be that little, you know what I mean? It can be just that you just laugh at somebody and they know that they can't do anything about it. I stick with the same advice I gave. Same thing. I'd say the same thing. Be careful with people like that. If you love them, if you care about them.
But that's the thing, though. With me and my brother, I don't know what it was like for you and yours, but I was able to talk to him. We went out, we had a drink, and we had a laugh and a game of pool and everything. And the relationship may have changed at that point, but it was a case of we then come on even kills, rather than it being a case of he's my older brother. It was more of I suppose between me and my brother, it was more of a case of me stepping up to being a man in his eyes, if you understand what I mean. It was a point of equality between us two in our relationship at that point.
Yes. Yeah, I know a thing or two about older brothers, and got that. I had 3 of them. One of them passed away, but they're all individual. But I think they're unique, and what we're talking about is universal. Goes for older sisters in a lot of ways too. But in some cases, when I'm giving this advice, you got to remember, I kept saying, if you want, if you love, if you like being around. I mean, if you don't like being around a person, if you don't love them, if you've had enough and you just don't want to be around them anymore, well, whip their ass, laugh in their face. It'll make it easier, because they probably won't call you.
There's a possibility of that, yeah. But that's the point, though, isn't it? That the fact is of the fear of the physical, so to speak. I'll use it as simplistic as that. The fear of the physical as a form of punishment is one of the reasons why we don't push things too far. We can push to a point where your mum would go, if you carry on, I'm going to call your fucking dad. If you carry on, and then you knew the third time, you didn't go past the third time, because she would, obviously. But that was the point of the fear. You knew what was going to happen. And I think kids nowadays don't have that. They don't have that fear. That's the reason why they go around in gangs, and that's the reason why they beat up everybody, at least in England anyway. While they're going around.
What's the sense of waiting for dad? 50% of people get divorced. There's that. And if nobody's going to, dole out an ass whipping, well, mom can just ground you. It really takes. I mean, if you think about it, it takes all the because you talk about toxic masculinity, toxic masculinity. I already stated what I feel. Very rarely, I think young girls, the spanking phase is over. Probably, 4 to 6 years old, somewhere around there. You're done slapping their hands because they're
Yeah,
going to grab something hot. But for boys, it might go. It might you might slap a boy right in the head when
mm.
he's 14. But anyway, these things are so tender. It's
No,
so
I'm
hard
not
to
too
come
sure
by.
about that
I do
because
believe that the application of force is underrated, overpunished,
mm,
and it's just ridiculous that we even think about it. Because as I said, unless they're broken bones, I mean, hey, some children get bent over and fucked. So if you have parents that actually care about you, because in most cases now,
yeah,
sometimes you got somebody trying to make themselves feel better and beating the shit out of kids. That's horrible. But in most cases, the old thing, well, this hurts me more than it does you. That's true, man.
yeah,
Parent doesn't want to, but
no,
you want to get some sunk into their brain. That's one way to do
mm,
it. It's called positive too. Let's remember that spanking is positive punishment. You're adding a spanking too, but positive and negative punishment. Just think of a plus and a negative. If you take an aspirin, if you take a Tylenol, and your headache goes away, that's negative reinforcement. That's negative punishment because something's being taken away. Your headache's being taken away. So I
yeah.
do believe in both positive and negative punishment. Um,
No, I do as well. I think there are forms of negative punishment. I think the forms of negative punishment nowadays is, oh, we're going to ground you, we're going to do this. Because even though if you were to add the spanking or the smacking at the end, then you have a fear that's added to it. If the last resort is the grounding, then they have nothing to worry about. As you quite rightly pointed out, with females themselves, they learn at a very quick age. Boys, we're trying to feel out where our social standings are, and we're always trying to rebel, trying to be a leader of the household. It's the reason why, after a certain age, you can't live with your parents, especially if you have a dad with you, because
yes.
you're always arguing with your dad. Now, you love your dad, you love being with him, you love spending time with him, but certain situations and certain decisions that other people make, especially your dad in some instances, you argue with because you would have done it differently. At that point in time, that's you trying to air your dominance over another male. That's when you have to leave. But if you don't have the form of being able to have a physical relationship, because boys themselves react physically more, we learn by touching, we learn by doing. Now, if we get somebody slap you on the back of the head and go, "You're doing it fucking wrong," we learn quicker than somebody going, "You're going into detention for an hour." All you need is that little hit. It's that simple. We just learn differently. We just are different. And the fact is that we don't put that into perspective anymore. Everybody's trying to be all equal. And the thing is, everybody should be treated equally. But the thing is, we're not created equally. Everybody is different, but should be treated the same. That's where it differs and where the lines blur.
Yeah, and I think people, we have to remember the past, and I think in our recent past we have good examples, and we can point back to how intelligent. I mean, a child graduating from the 8th grade in 1870 was
Hmm.
more intelligent than somebody that's in college second year, here. It's a
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, they would be. I mean, it's just a fact. All you have to do is
I
pick up
agree.
an 8th grade book from that era. And another thing, I mean, it was the way they learned. A speller, in other words, their reading book,
Hmm.
they would be expected to leave the book at their desk when they got up. So when you think about your reading book when you were in school and you read it there, and sometimes the teacher would call on you to read it, and you'd read the book, you'd get up without the book. And
Hmm.
so an 8th grade student would have at one time, if they got an A, memorized all of these stories and all of their spellers. In other words, reading book folks. That's what they call them in the old days, those spellers.
Hmm.
And it's amazing what the human being can do. You just don't do it anymore. But
Yeah.
in doing that, in the old days, positive punishment was something they believed in wholeheartedly. If you got it wrong or if you didn't do your lesson at all, they'd probably give you switching. But we also can keep pointing back common
Hmm.
sense, because I want to play both sides of it, of course, and go all the way back to Sparta. And oh my
Mm.
goodness, man! I
Yeah,
mean,
throwing the kids off the cliffs and making them fight between themselves, and whoever wins is the victor, and whoever loses is going to die. Yeah.
in some cases they didn't always make them fight to death. It was always, in fact, that was very rare. But to
Mm.
become a Spartan man, you had to go kill a slave and not get caught. If you did get caught, the punishment could kill you. A lot of
Yeah.
kids died when they were 14, 15 because they got caught, and getting whipped and beat up was too much for them to handle. The one thing for sure, there were about 20% more. There were about, for every 100 Spartan women, there were only 80 Spartan men. And that had to
Mm.
do with war, yes, but it also had to do with how difficult it was to just live when you were a Spartan male. And so that very corporal side, I mean, if we could all remember that you don't want to punish somebody for your own pleasure. We do too often forget that. So somebody don't like Obama, and he was using what you call it, he was using the IRS, and he was, we
Mm.
know that
Yeah.
thing. And oh, I don't like him. So since he did that, and they brung it up on Nixon during Watergate, I
Yep.
really want to screw him, and they need to bring him back out of retirement. He's a president, United States president. People lose perspective.
Yes.
They would honestly rather drag a United States, and these are Yanks, these are Americans. I'm talking about common sense. They would
Mm.
rather do this to make themselves feel better, to punish this person, to make themselves feel. But that's a kind of punishment that psychologically. I'm sorry too. I'm not going to go to the NPC, but this just gets right to the heart of what we're talking about.
No, I actually completely agree.
If your point psychologically is to cause someone pain, to make yourself feel better, and you call that punishment, that is a mild form of psychopathy. You're a little psychotic. And there are a lot of people like that. I may be a little like that, but I really try to. I mean, I more than try to fight against it. I want to see as much justice for Christina Blasey Ford, whom
Yeah.
I don't think was ever touched by anybody in her life that she didn't ask to touch her,
Mm.
but that was also terribly used by these people and will now be thrown away. I feel as bad
Mm.
for her as I do for Kavanaugh. Uh,
I do as well. I think both of I do actually think that both of them were actually victims. I'm slightly different. I don't think Kavanaugh did anything to her. I do reckon that something happened to her at some point in her life. I don't think it was Kavanaugh. I don't think it was Kavanaugh at all. But
Well, let's
something's
just say
happened to
that
her.
she absolutely. Let me put it to you this way, because I am leaning to the right. Everybody knows that. I'm glad Kavanaugh's nominated. Everybody knows that. So let's say that it comes out that Christina Blasey Ford absolutely fabricated. It comes out, who knows how, taped confession. She comes out and admits it. Who knows? I still don't want to see her punished in any punishment. What we're talking about goes to the heart of humanity.
Mm.
If we deal out a punishment to someone that's any worse than what we would, not what we'd give ourselves either. Too many people want to use that. We punish ourselves a lot. If
Yeah,
we
we
would
do.
give this any more, someone else, any more punishment than we would give the person we love the most, the dog that we have at home that we love the most, that we just utterly dote on this animal. If you wouldn't do that to this thing, then don't do it to somebody else. And I hate to use the dog analogy, but some people, whenever I use a human analogy, be like, fuck it, I don't care. I'll kill him. As Jensen Quinn be like, I kill him and eat him. Don't hurt the dog. Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, I'm with you on that one. Don't hurt the fucking dog. Do whatever you want to the human. Fucking do whatever you want to that. Don't hurt the dog.
Well, and I hope everybody got that. I mean, if it came out that she was guilty of that, fabricating completely, I'm not going to go all MCJK and be like, burn that bitch at the stake. That fucking bitch went out and destroyed a good man's life. She needs to be killed. I'm not going to go down that route. My route would be, well, please tell people how you feel so that if they're tempted to do this in the future, they can ask themselves these important questions about, is it. And listen, of course, folks, it's speculation. I don't know that she lied or whatever. But they can ask themselves the important question: is it so important for me to try to destroy this person or be famous for 15 minutes or whatever?
Yeah.
Or to get this $1 million
Yeah.
to go through this.
No, I completely agree with you. I mean, we have to look at the degrees of the punishment. I think that's the whole idea of what this whole stream is about. It is that, yeah, we should have the idea of spanking or smacking and things like that, but you have to look at every situation and every circumstance as it arises to what level of disciplining that you should give, if you're going to give any at all. I personally actually think that people that come forward with forced rape allegations or allegations in general should have some form of punishment against them. But
Well,
that's my opinion. That's my
now let me
opinion
be
on.
clear. Let me be clear. And with what she did, common sense, there
Hmm.
was no threat of him being uh, uh, going to prison. There was no criminal threat. Now, if she said that he just did this to her 3 weeks ago and filed a police report just now, and it was found out that this is what it was, the people she said were there weren't there, it just didn't happen. No, at that point, you've got to do something. I
Yeah,
disagree
no, I
with
agree.
actually what happens there. You talk about punishment, and this isn't feeling better. This is just blind justice. If a woman is accusing a man of doing something that will get him put in prison for 8 years and be the foulest of the foul and probably get raped himself here in the States. I
Yep,
don't know how it is
definitely.
there.
No,
And
definitely.
so boom, then well, if it should reflect that. So in other
Yeah.
words, if she's guilty of that, she should be looking at 8 years. Now, if she's never done nothing before, could that be negotiated down? Yes, of course.
Hmm.
But she should at least go to jail for a little while.
I think it should be half the sentence. If somebody would get sentenced to 8 years, the person
Or
that for doing it, then she should get sentenced to 4 years, or the person should get sentenced to 4 years. They should get at least half the sentence. That way, people that come forward with forced rape allegations, it goes to the point of the stream. Nothing happens to them. So if they had something that would be a repercussion in finding out that they were falsifying evidence or falsifying stuff, then they wouldn't fucking do it. That's the whole point of this stream, to have the levels and the degrees of punishment. The punishment should always be there for stuff that you do. After all, otherwise, why else would you do stuff if you can't get punished for it? You'd carry on and do whatever you would.
well,
Do we all think? Sorry, go on.
well, I'm just going to briefly agree with you and throw this in. If you think about it, if someone is working at a plant and they're on the line and not supposed to fraternize and they have an affair with someone that works on the line, well, it's not really a big deal. But if the boss comes down and has an affair with someone on the line, it's a big deal. You see what I mean? Common sense. There's always variations of things.
Definitely.
And so we have to look at that. You know, if someone is just flat out saying, I mean, these women have a lot of power, is what I'm saying. You would punish the boss
definitely.
a lot more. And if you're going to say, I'm trying to get this out, I want to get this out very succinctly. If you're going to say that believe women are right, believe victims, they're a victim when they say, that's giving a female so much power that they should be held. I'm starting, not only do I agree with the at least half, I'm starting to lean toward they should just do the sentence that would have been given to the male. Or female. I mean, if a female's, because females probably falsely, I can't imagine a female being falsely accused of rape, but I'm sure it probably has happened.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, me myself, I think but that's the point of the stream. It's to find out the levels of the punishment that should be fitted to the crime, so to speak, or to the actions. I think we should be able to have that discussion openly without people going, "Oh, you smack your child, or you're a heinous person. You're only doing it for this reason or that person, or spanking damages children."
Jeez.
Well, it didn't damage your generation. It didn't damage my generation. But you look at how the crime's spiking. You're looking at how just civil unrest in itself is escalating with this new generation. Look at all the people that are fighting in the streets, especially in America, Antifa and MAGA hats at the minute.
If discipline destroyed a child, common sense, it wasn't a spanking, it was a beating. Sorry.
Oh, no, I completely not agree with you. That's the point where I was actually going to go. It's not the case of the smacking or the spanking itself would have been anything to stop the children from necessarily being murderers, because there's always been murderers. But there's always that point of the spanking and the smacking that always lets people know that there is repercussions for what they're doing and what they have done, because it is the last line of a form of detention, so to speak, or form of punishment. That's the last line of punishment. But That's the point, because it's the last line. It's the most severe. You're not going to start off with a spanking. Maybe some people would in severe cases, I don't know. But generally, you wouldn't start off with a spanking. Generally, you'd work up to it because it's the last line of it, of the punishment. That's the point of this whole stream, is to realize that people that say, oh, we should spank kids, are not saying that we should beat the shit out of them. They're saying it should be a last line of punishment. Because otherwise, how else are you going to stop a 15, 16-year-old from climbing out their window and going the fuck out of the house or going out and getting drunk and stoned? Now, I don't care if they're going out to get drunk and stoned. I don't really care about that. That's their choice. It's the point of going against what their parents have already said. That's the issue. How did they punish the child when that child comes back if they can't do anything about
it? Yeah. I was just thinking about, even though under penalty of spanking, I did some wild thing. Talk about 15. I mean, as Jewish, we didn't do nothing on the Sabbath, and that's sundown Friday. So my parents didn't want me to I wasn't supposed to be going to dances.
Yeah.
Saturday night after sundown was fine, but if it was a Friday night dance, I was out of luck. And I was going out with this girl named Amanda. She was my girlfriend. I was very young. I was in I think it was in the 4th grade. But I had this Honda 80. Anyway, snow was flying. It was like a January ice dance or something. And man, anyway. And so
that's the point, isn't it?
Spankings aren't going to stop everything. In fact, if anything, I knew if I got caught doing that, common sense, that would have been one more of the times. Like,
yeah, but that's the reason why you would have limited yourself to doing it, though. You would only have done it if you knew you were going to not necessarily get some, but you were going to have a good time. Where if you weren't sure you were going to have a good time, it was just your mates that have just called you up. You'd be like, may not be a good idea because I know what's going to happen if I get caught. And it's that point, because you're not going to stop everybody from doing stuff that they want to do, because if they really want to do it, they're going to do it regardless. But it's the point of having that line of punishment that stops people from going, yeah, maybe that's a bad idea. And that's the bit that you need. You need that common, should we say, moral compass, should we say. I use that as a terminology. You need that form of moral compass put into you, because then you realize that you're doing something that you're not supposed to, rather than just people going, oh, it's all right, I'd only get showered at. That's not the same. It's not the same. It doesn't give you a moral compass, and that's what we're lacking in today's generations.
Maybe people have lost that because, nowadays we get in our car and we drive here and yon, but it wasn't too long ago, just 100 years ago, everybody had a horse. Every family had a horse, and damn near everybody had a horse. You used donkeys, you used oxen. And, if they didn't do right, you had to give them a swat or give your horse a wee bit of the spur. But you never wanted to gouge your horse with the spur and mess him up, make him lame or hurt him too bad. You know what I mean? So maybe it's that corporal punishment is not used for all these other things at all, that it does make it harder to temper the hand. You know what I mean by that common sense, to temper the hand. In other words, you're not just really lashing out now to get some aggression out.
Of course.
You are actually, using this as one of your tools as an authority figure. And let's remember, corporal punishment and the use of force is a sign of authority. There is no country that we live in that if you go kill Mrs. Jones and just try to go live in your hut in Vanuatu, that's like the most freest place I can think of right now, where they just don't have a government for most part.
Sure.
But if you try to do that, no, people are going to come. The authority is going to come, and they are going to, if you don't come along peacefully, forcibly take you to justice.
Exactly.
And I think we've lost sight of that, man. One of the most poignant things, and I'm just trying to kiss your ass, but I keep mulling this over, and I probably be part of my final point, is times have changed. So I'm going to keep this off my final point. I'll go on a ramble.
Yeah, that's fine, mate. I would like to point out that we keep on saying about being smacked and smacking and things like that. Nobody's going to be advocating for any sort of proper beatings or just
hell no.
For people that are abusing it, nobody is advocating for anything like that. But you make an exceptionally great point, where it's a case of capital punishment is put into place. Now, for people that don't believe in any sort of form of positive punishment, does that mean that they would shout at their kids? Because I know that this is a parenting tactic that's been used and employed by certain people, especially for kids when they didn't know what ADHD was, where they would just let the kid get away with everything because they didn't believe in shouting at the kid. They didn't believe in giving any form of discipline to the kid.
That's insanity.
But is that what's stemming what's going on now about not smacking? Is that what's stemming on about not taking people's phones away? The idea of, oh, it's their right to have the phone, even though their mum and dad are the ones fucking paying for it. Is it the right of the parents to decide what they do to punish their child? Or is it the right of the state to dictate to them what they can and cannot do? And then the state wondering why there's such a high crime rate that's going on in most westernized countries now.
Oh, man, we let the state run amok, brother. They've gotten so used to taking people's rights away and then selling them back to them in the form of permits. Like if you want to have a bar, you got to get a liquor permit. You got to get a permit to serve the liquor. You got to get a permit to have food and a permit for this and permit for that. Zoning permits and up the yin yang. We've gotten so used to that now we're letting them take away everything, and some of the things they won't even permit back to you. I mean, that's it too. I mean, that's what's happening with what you just said. They take the right away from you. Now look, if your child sits down and locks arms with a bunch of child, and that child's like the same, like I say, whooping age, man, 12, 13 years old. And I've watched it. Look up police mace young kids at mayor's office. I think it was a mayor's office. But this cop actually takes Q-tips, you know, I'm trying to think of what they call them over there in England, but you know what I mean, like a little fuzzy piece of length on the end of a stick. Take Q-tips and got mace on them, was rubbing it on the kid's eyes. I mean, the funny thing is that the state says you can't, they take away your right as a parent to use whatever. I'm telling you, folks, some people grow up daggone in the belly of a princess that's American and shouldn't even be there. Some kids grow up Oliver Twist. It's just the way it is. Man, you gotta let it be the way it is. Trying to change things. You could look a child. Oh, it's because like, oh, it traumatized them. A child that was the product of being brutally beat. And look, and I'm not saying if you know about these things to let these things go on, but a child that's being brutally beat, sexually molested, all kinds of horrible hardships and harshness and loss. This could turn that person into someone great. We have examples of this throughout history to where they wouldn't even have been who they were if they hadn't have went through these horrible, horrible things. So, you know, the more I think about it, the more I have to put my foot down and say, look, people are going to go through the life that they're going to go through. If we allow them to do that, the only other thing we can do is what we were just talking about before I get way off, because you probably have something else to say about it, is if we just give up the right to the damn state and say, yeah, oh yeah, they know better. They'll mace our kids. They'll lock them in a cage. If your kid goes to juvie, they don't get, it's not like they have a bed like at home. But try to put a lock on your kid's door that's been an asshole and is sneaking out of the window. Lock the window, common sense, and lock it. Now, only when you're there, so if the fire or something, you can't say, you know, only when you're there. But they'd freak out, man.
Exactly.
But they got them, lock them away.
Yeah, I completely agree. I find it very, very interesting because you got a lot of people that say that you can't do this with children, you can't do that with children. Now, again, we will alliterate and we will make sure for anybody that's on the left or anybody that's a bit weird about these type of topics that can't understand of abstract thinking, that we're not advocating for the beating the shit out of children. It's a form of punishment that we're advocating for. The fact of putting a kid over a knee and smacking them 4 or 5 times, something like that, but for their age, as in putting the power in for their age, not just whacking them from a young age as hard as you can. But when you take away those tools for parents and for other people as well to be able to discipline children in themselves, children naturally push boundaries. Even from the ages of 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, they are pushing their boundaries. They are pushing what they can and cannot do. They're exploring their limitations. Now, some people do this out of the form of just to do with exploration, and some do it because they're naughty. We as parents and we as people and we as humans, we can actually use our empathy and actually work out what it is that we're actually trying to see in front of us and what they're trying to do. Now, if we feel that they're doing something wrong and they're doing it on purpose, we can act accordingly. Now, if they're generally not knowing what's going on, we can then act accordingly, as in not using a firmer form of punishment. We can use a selection of tools. But if you have somebody that's doing something completely and utterly on purpose, and the tool to actually physically stop them has been taken away from you, how do you stop them?
Hmm. You don't know. And I mean, and we've also all been around children that are uh, usually little boys, sometimes little girls, but are biters. They'll bite you, kick you, angry kids that are the last shot and be mean. In this instance, what do? Eventually, you do have to teach them the lesson that they'll learn one way or the other. That there's always someone stronger than you, and they will exert force against you to teach you not to be this way. And eventually, I mean, this has happened, over and over again. It's happening right now as we speak. Eventually, the child's going to grow up, be a boy or girl, but usually boy, and think all these things. Like you said, look, due to boarding school and whatnot, I was basically, I didn't live with my parents and after the age of 11, 12 years old. I was gone. I was gone away and at school. And then when we were home, it was doing something fun or vacation. They were gone and I was chilling. Um, I- that's been one of the best things ever for me, man. I really think so because I still had parental influence, good positive parental influence, and I had a structured thing. In fact, when I seen my parents, it was wonderful because they were always, they missed me. I missed them.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway, but I hear Jesse Lee Peterson talk quite a lot about what you touched on about how, if you're 18 and male and living at home, you got to get out of there.
Yeah,
You got to get out of there. You can't be, 19, 20. In fact, I know you had to go. You had like a little rough, but we all know you didn't hide it yet on the internet.
Yeah.
And you were like staying in a situation where there was parental people around.
Yep.
And for you, that was not a happy time. It's not that your parents are assholes, not that anything. It's just not, a real man doesn't want to be in that situation because a real man doesn't need that kind of authority anymore.
No.
I still say though, we got to have it. We can't delegate it to the state only. You have to have the whole tool bag. I think I heard you use that term earlier. The whole tool bag that you can reach into and use to discipline your own children.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, if you can't discipline your own children, who the fuck's going to? I mean, are you going to let the state discipline a child? That means that you give the state the power to hurt your children if you believe that you can't. And if you think that the state is going to be able to determine what level of strength to use against your child better than what you could determine, then you're a fucking idiot. There's a lot of things that I believe the state is good for, and there's a lot of things that I believe that the state isn't good for. And one of the things is child rearing. The parents should be the ones with assistance from stuff like the NHS, the hospitals, and medical practitioners, whatnot, should be able to decide what's best for their children. Because 9 times out of 10, yes, there are some whack jobs out there, but 9 times out of 10, the parents will do what they feel is best for their children because they love their children. Yes, sometimes it doesn't happen that way. But generally, that's the way that humanity is. We love our children. We protect our children. We want the best for our children. And sometimes that means bending the child over your knee and giving them a spank because they've been bloody naughty.
Beating the air of them, shit on them. So now here in the United States and probably over there, everybody knows who Uncle Sam is.
Yep.
But how widely known is the figure over there, common sense, John Bull? Do you know who John Bull is?
The name rings a bell, but rather than me trying to guess, that lets you just explain it.
I mean, I didn't know how prevalent it was because it's so long ago. Uncle Sam has stuck around. John Bull was basically the British version of Uncle Sam. He's a shorter, kind of a portlier fellow with a Union Jack for a waistcoat, cane. I mean, he's kind of chubby, but he still looks like he's sticky in the eye with the cane. It's anyway. Because I was going to say, you don't want to turn it over to John Bull. I almost said that, but then I started thinking, well, if I even say it, even a common sense guy know what the fuck I'm talking about.
Nah, I'm not old enough, mate. Not old enough.
Right. Well, I'm not for abdicating the children to Uncle Sam. The man that I was speaking of, I don't really want to even use his first or last name. If somebody found out who I was and this was ever found, they could find out. I mean, anyway, but the teacher, this one-room teacher. Now, he moves around. He works for a church that has a lot of different schools. The only people that have more schools in this particular church is the Catholic Church.
Mm.
And they have the system where it's kindergarten through 8. In
Yeah.
fact, it's 1 through 8. There's no kindergarten in the school. Is in a one-room school, and then you go to academy. The rest is a boarding school. Would
Okay.
be ninth for graduation, and it would be considered a prep school by any standard. They've
Mm.
got a good hardy curriculum, and 90% of the kids live on campus. He's in this part of it with the one-room school. Man, to watch how it works in this situation where you actually have the 4th and 5th graders teaching the 2nd and 1st graders how they learn math.
Yeah.
You the idea of learning, as you said, being hands-on, is you
Mm.
have somebody at the helm and everybody learns how to do it and then teaches the man below, and by man I mean human assholes, and
Yeah. Yeah.
teaches the man below him. That's how you do it. You
Yeah.
you learn it until you can teach the man below you well enough, and then they teach, and then you learn the next thing, and go and go and go and go and go till you know what the teacher knows and everybody's equal.
Yeah.
And to see this work and to flow in that way. And let me tell you, since the new way, when I went through that system, and so did
Mm.
Mrs. O. And since the new way of no corporal punishment, I will say that situation hasn't changed much.
Mm.
In fact, I can't see any change in it at all. I never saw in the time I was in 1 through 8 anyone use corporal punishment. It was just what nobody had to use it. Anyway, I'm stumbling out to say we change things so quickly. We want to say, well, look, there's not enough. Think about back in the 60s. There's not enough black people in the school. Therefore, we will bus them to this school.
Yeah.
There's not enough somebody else here. We're going to make it equal. Man, when we try to force changes like that, we're stuck in these types of situations.
Mm.
Human beings are not meant to just be forced and stuffed in that box, and not meant to be that way.
No, I completely and utterly agree with you. I think another thing with the idea of teachers and the idea of this punishment that we're talking about, obviously, the thing is with this form of equality that has now come about to make student and teacher equal. I think it's absolutely
That's crazy.
ridiculous. I think it's
Yeah.
absolutely ridiculous because how can the student be equal to the teacher?
That's
And if they
crazy.
were equal, then why is the teacher teaching the student? Because they're supposed to be equal. It makes no logical sense whatsoever to me. But you have to give the power back to the actual teacher so that the teacher can get a hold of the class and actually make sure that the class is learning generally. As you quite rightly said, and even in my generation, most of the time teachers had control of their classrooms. They weren't like a beautiful mind in that sort of aspect because the teacher would be fucking not beating the children, but would either be sending the children out of the class, telling them that they're not welcome anymore, booting them out, or doing the punishment that we've been talking about because they had the power, not the student. And because we've taken away that form of punishment, guess who now has the power? Because you've made it an equal playing field. Because
Yeah.
now the student has the power.
We got this forced schooling where they all have to go to the same place, and you got to. I mean, in this one room situation I'm talking about, I think up at the
Mm,
school right now there might be 9 children, 10 children.
mm,
That's like it's like one in every grade, and maybe a couple grades have 2 or 3. Not
sure.
very many.
Mm,
Man, the teachers got it's all screwed up, man.
mm,
You can easily see things that work in history and things that don't. If
mm,
something works, why change it? Oh, well, wouldn't be possible, Ogre, because now you're talking about, yeah, even in New York, everywhere, if it was just incumbent upon the parents. I mean, we still have a system in this country where you pay your property taxes. Your property taxes account for schooling. They call it millage up here. I mean, there's all different
mm,
things. They get funding different places. Federal government gives them a lot so they can
mm.
have a say. But that's basically how they get it, is from property tax. I
Yeah.
mean, if the government wants something, it gets it. They take
Mm,
that property tax, they consolidate it. Why not just let the community do it?
sure. No,
We did it that way here for years as a country, as the United States of America.
mm,
1974 was when the federal government got involved in the schooling system. Common sense guy.
yeah.
Now, before that, they would meddle, and like I said, they'd bust them in the 65. But
Mm,
1974 was when the Department of Education was created. Before that, there was no Department of Education.
mm. I've got a couple of things that I actually want to address in the chat. Ain't two of them are from Ain't Jack, and one of them's two of them are from. Anyway, first of all, Ain't Jack, and he put schools are actually designed to teach girls and not boys. That's absolutely, completely not utterly true. There's nothing that I would say about that. The reason why it's designed for girls is because exactly what we've already talked about. Girls learn by reading, boys learn by doing. We need physical touch. That's why boys are normally generally better at wood class or PE or general stuff, where girls are normally better at the academic side of stuff, because that's the way it's designed. So when Miss Quinn B says, "So all boys, so at an all boys school, teach them what sewing," it's not what they're teaching; it's how they're teaching it.
Oh man, we did.
That's the difference. And then obviously you have Ain't Jack again, which is the point that I really wanted to address. Dr. Spock in his book said you should treat kids as equals. I think that you should talk to a child at eye level when you're talking to a child. Now, when you're teaching a child, the power has to be with the teacher, not with the child. You can't be on equal terms as a child and a teacher. For a start, the child will lose respect for the teacher. You have to have that level of respect for a teacher, and the way you do that is by giving the teacher more power. It's just simple psychology. And then you have Tank that has just said you should never treat kids as equals, even if they're prodigies, and basically just pointing on the fact that what I've just said. I don't think that kids should have the same power. Now, if you're going to teach a kid and you're going to talk to a child, talk to them at eye level. Show them that you have respect for them, but the power is with the teacher, not the child, in my opinion. What do you think, Hoga, on that?
Yeah, I got a lot of things that I think, but I've got to get going here very quickly. Common sense.
No, that's fine. I'm gonna get off as well. To be fair, so if you wanted to carry on with a final word or a final couple of points, then that's fine, and then I can close up.
I do have just a final thing to say. Back in 1974, when the United States government took over, a couple things happened. The Union was already pretty strong in there, but the government got involved in two ways. Not only was there the Department of Education with a huge purse and the power of the purse string over them, and they got them used to the suckling on this monetary teat, and they grew fat on that teat, and they have grown fat on that teat. And they talk about the expense of all these things. Well, it's because it's crazy what they charge for school supplies and what they say they pay. I don't think they do. It's kind of like the $500 hammer of the old days. The money goes somewhere, but it ain't to the hammer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look, if you look back there, 1974, the unions already heavily involved. Right now, the teachers union, I believe, is the largest union in the United States with well over 3 million members. It's huge, and they're very, very powerful. And so you have this pull on the Democrats specifically. I don't even want to use political terms, but it's the way it is. It is the way it is. You had government as a whole, Republicans and Democrats, that now have the Department of Education that are both using this as a lever, saying, well, we got to do this, we got to do that. Let me tell you something else, folks. 1974, Department of Education instituted track the IQ of the United States of America. I'm going to paraphrase the book Moby Dick right now by Herman Melville and say that he's talking about the whaling, being a whaler. Remember that, of course, Moby Dick's about a whale. He said, in the fishery, that you see that the harpooneers are usually isolados, islanders, and Africans. In other words, they were dark skinned. They were these people, these savages, he's saying. But the first mates are almost always American. He says, like in so many other things, America is more than willing to, America supplies the brains and the rest of the world is more than willing to supply the brawn. And I know that sounds arrogant, but it was true until 1974. When we at that time still had the highest IQ on the face of the planet. We invented the A bomb over here, and you can talk about Einstein and where he was born or whatever. He was here when it was invented. We invented it here. We did all kinds of wonderful, marvelous things here. Only a few places in civilization come close, Great Britain being one of them. Since I have a British here, I have to admit that. But that's the one that came close. And then it dropped. The government gets what the government pays for. 74. The United States government created the Department of Education very quickly, and this is I'm ending on. When you could no longer in the United States, so now you have the power of the Democrats working for the unions and the entire government with their finger in education, whatever reason they want, track the freaking IQ. It goes down with the amount of money they spend and the more the government's involved. And as soon as you said, I don't want you, teacher, spanking my children anymore, it wasn't a year in this country, and your ability to use corporal punishment on your own child now was taken away. Education has too much power. We need to change it. If you have a child, remember that a wise man once said, spare the rod and spoil the child. Be good to your family and friends, for you know it will be gone.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with everything you just said on that one, to be fair. I don't actually have too much of a long word or a long final discussion or anything. My final little points are exactly what I've made in this stream already. If you want people to actually be able to punish the children in a caring and positive light, the way you do that is by giving the power to the parents, not to the state. Now, yes, there are some parents that will abuse this power, and they need to be punished for it themselves. They need to be absolutely stripped of them. I don't even care if you put them up against a wall and you shoot the cunts. I don't care. But in that aspect, you do need to have the power to the parents to be able to punish their children, at least. Because otherwise you get what's happening now. Children running amok. Children that are actually going against the police, that are not scared of the police anymore, because they're not worried about the altercation that can happen from them, because they believe that they're untouchable. They believe that nobody can hit them. So even the point in our country that if a 15-year-old comes up to you and starts a fight and you're over the age of 16 and you hit that child, you are then an adult that is fighting with a minor and you get put to prison. That's in this country, in the UK. I don't know what it's like in any other countries, but I know that for a fact. That's not any sort of way of shape or form of being able to deal with what's going on. Now, I'm not trying to suggest in any sort of light or fashion that people should go around and beat people up. I'm not saying that. But people should have the right to defend themselves. And the children that are going around and trying to start fights should know that there are repercussions from it. And the fact is that there is no repercussions. And put this into your own perspective. If you had no repercussions for what you perceived that you wanted, would anything stop you? Would anything stop you if you knew that there was no repercussions, or at least thought there wasn't? Because I can give you my honest opinion right now, right this second. I know that if I thought that there was no repercussions for what I wanted to do in certain aspects, I'd go and do it. But it's the fear of knowing that there is a punishment that keeps us as a moral society. Because it's not always the morals that play a part in society. It's the fear of the punishment that can actually be what stops us from doing and what stops us from becoming. That's the point that I have to make. Sometimes it's the punishment that stops us, not our morals itself. So with that being said, guys, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video. Thank you very much for watching this live stream, should I say. Thank you very much to my guest, Mr. Ogre. Thank you very much for taking the time to come on again, mate. It's always a pleasure, as always. I know he's disappeared, but he had to get off, so that's fine. So, bye everyone. Take care. And I can't wait to see you all again real soon. Bye, guys. See you again soon. Bye-bye for now.